There we go. Okay, so let's talk about, Julie, could you share one of your complex sentences that you wrote for homework last night?
You can't play video games until you finish your homework.
Okay, you can't play video games until you finish your homework. Great rule. One at my house. Okay, Griffin, can you tell me what is the subordinating conjunction in this? Until. Okay, and Sarah, can you tell me what's the independent clause?
You can't play video games?
Okay, you can't play video games, so there's our independent clause. And then, Reagan, what's the dependent clause?
You finish your
Okay, but we're gonna have the conjunction in there, so until you finish your homework, and that's the dependent clause. Okay, so that's what you guys should have done. Now, I also wanna talk about punctuation. Spencer, do you see any missing punctuation from this sentence?
comma after games.
Okay, can anybody tell me why we have a comma after games? Raise your hand if you can tell me.
It's a conjunction. It's separating two clauses.
Okay, what kind of clause is this at the beginning?
Independent.
Okay, it's independent. Wait a second, I'm sorry. If this is independent at the
There
beginning,
is no comma.
There is no
and the dependent is at the end, there's no comma. Okay? So typically you'd have a comma to separate, but only if the dependent clause is at the beginning.
Like, until you finish your homework, comma,
Yes.
you can't play video.
There is one more piece of punctuation missing. So, Audrey, what would that be? It's a period. Yeah, it's so silly. You would wonder, why is it not there? But lots of people omit periods. Okay, so, Davis.
Do you want me to do this?
Yes.
After we finish our game, you should grab food.
After we finish our games,
Yes.
we should grab food. Okay, Amanda, can you tell me what is the subordinating conjunction? After, okay. Joy, what's the independent clause?
We should grab food.
Okay, we should grab food. There's an independent clause. What's the dependent clause, Tate?
After we finish our game.
Okay, so that's our dependent clause. Is there any punctuation missing, Isaac?
Comma after games.
Okay, because this time we have a dependent clause at the beginning, and so we have to set apart by a comma. Okay, questions about that? Okay, Amanda, can you put your book away, please? Okay, I would like for somebody to share a sentence where your dependent clause comes at the end. Okay,
Oh, never mind.
Owen.
I heated my coffee up because it was cold.
Okay, because clauses are really frequently used. So I heated my coffee up. Do you drink coffee, Owen?
Sometimes.
Coffee is where it's at.
Oh, it's so impressive if you drink coffee. I heated my coffee up because it was cold.
Do you drink coffee?
Okay, Julie, what's the dependent clause? I'm sorry, what's the subordinating conjunction?
Because.
Because? What's the dependent clause, Huck?
Let's see, because it was cold. I mean, oh, I'm sorry, I heated my coffee up.
Dependent?
No, I was right the first time, because it was cold.
Because it was cold, so there's our dependent clause. Lena, what's our independent clause? What?
Because it was. Is the earth independent?
Yes.
I heated my coffee.
Okay, I heated my coffee up. Okay, Jaden, are we missing any punctuation? No, none. Now, I'm gonna tell you, lots of people want to put a comma before or after because. You do not do that if it's the middle of the sentence. Only if it's at the beginning and it's starting a dependent clause. Okay, Isaac.
How come when we were little, people said you couldn't start sentences because?
a lot of times, if you start a sentence with because, it's easy to make it incomplete. Like if you say, you know, classic kid question, why? Why can't I stay out till midnight? Because it's too late. That's not a complete sentence. Okay? Thank you, Spencer. Does anybody have any questions about complex sentences? Is this just great review for you and you've got this?
Like, so for this sentence, I could have said, because it was cold, I heated up my coffee.
You could have, and you would have punctuated it. You would have had
Yes.
cold, I mean a comma after cold. Okay, so you guys don't have any questions about this because we're going on to compound complex. Okay. So, let's see, is there? No, we'll do this with the next thing. So when you're making a compound complex sentence, there are a couple ways you can do it. One is you can start with a complex sentence. So I need one more person to give me a complex sentence that they wrote. So, the Huck?
Let's see. When you speak to an adult, use a respectful tone of voice.
So when you speak to an adult, use a respectful, I'm just gonna say tone. Okay.
Wait, I have a question.
Uh-huh.
What if you need, a subject
Where would you need a subject, Davis?
after adult? Because.
Right. Because
Wait,
right
you-
now, when you speak, use.
You
You have two,
But isn't there,
Verbs.
like, isn't it like a,
an implied you.
yeah,
Yeah, I meant to check into that. I'm not comfortable with implied use
that's what
in the
I
middle of
did.
a
I
sentence.
marked my
But that
subjects
way-
and.
So let's just, to make it simpler,
Do you want
when
me to
you
use
speak to
another?
an adult, you should
Should use.
use. Okay, and I'll make a note to check into that in the middle of the sentence. Okay, you should use. Okay, so we've got a subordinating conjunction of what, Jack? In this sentence, what's the subordinating conjunction?
When?
When, and Jackson, what is the independent clause?
You should use a respectful tone.
You should use a respectful tone. And what's the dependent clause, Zach?
When you speak to,
Okay, so we've got this complex sentence. How could we turn it into a compound complex? Like, we're going to have to add an independent clause with a fan voice. So do you have an idea about how to do that, Isaac?
Maybe sort of add on to, or no, you can make when a prepositional phrase by taking out the subject.
Okay, you don't want to take out the dependent clause or the independent clause. You can't change it around, but you've got to keep it dependent, independent. You've got to add another independent clause, Jackson.
You should use a respectful tone, and you should act respectful,
And good posture.
or yes.
And you should, let's do something besides
Make eye
respectful.
contact.
And have good posture.
And
Have good manners.
You should have.
have good,
Yeah.
okay, what would be a word besides good?
Have,
Amazing.
Exceptional.
no,
Oh, exceptional
sounds good.
manners.
That was an exceptional word, Jackson.
Thank you, Spencer.
Okay, so we're just gonna really be beating these banned words to death, not even using them in their sentences. When you speak to an adult, you should use a respectful tone, and you should have exceptional manners. Now, this is an example of a kind of a long and wordy sentence, but for our purposes, it is a compound complex. What's the coordinating conjunction, Joy? And Sarah, what's the second independent clause?
You should have exceptional manners.
Okay, you should have exceptional manners.
Wait, when you leave out the and?
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so that's one way you can do it. You start with a complex sentence and you just add an independent clause. Now, is there any way we could have added an independent clause at the beginning?
You should have exceptional manners when you speak to an adult. And then you could, but then it would make no sense.
And you should use use a respectful tone. Okay.
But that'd be kind of.
There
So-
was a subordinate conjunction
Yeah, when you speak to an adult, you should have exceptional manners when you speak to an adult, and you should use a respectful tone. It just so happens that's really wordy. And we're gonna talk later on about how you can make your compound complex sentences not wordy and awkward, but right now I just wanna illustrate it. So you can start with a dependent clause. The other way that you can form them is you can start with a compound sentence. So can somebody give me a compound sentence? Somebody who is very good at creating, Davis?
The cat ran and the dog barked.
Oh my, the cat ran, and it's short, I like that. The cat ran and the dog barked. Okay, Zach, what's the coordinating conjunction in this sentence? And, okay. And then what's the first independent clause, Spencer?
The cat ran.
The cat ran. What's the second independent clause, Jack?
The dog barked.
The dog barked. Okay. Two independent clauses. So we now need to have a dependent clause added. So, Griffin, can you think of a dependent clause that you could put at the beginning or the end? Okay, so here's what I want you to do. Just think of a subordinating conjunction. Tell me a subordinating conjunction. Although. Okay. So what could you say? This is going to Isaac. Although. Just go ahead and give me a subject and a verb. Although what?
They stopped after a minute.
Okay, good. Although. And actually, I kind of like that at the back. The cat ran and the dog barked. Although they stopped after a minute. Okay, so what is, and you do not need to be writing this down if it is making sense. So Reagan, what's the coordinating or subordinating conjunction now? Although. And Grayson, what's the dependent clause?
They stopped after a minute.
Okay, although they stopped after a minute, okay? So we've got a dependent clause. Do we need any punctuation tape? Yeah, tape.
Yes.
Yes. No.
Why not? You're correct, why not?
Wait, would we need one after ran though?
Because.
Oh.
No.
Okay, hold on. Davis is correct, you need one here. Why, Davis?
Because they're two independent clauses
And you always put a comma
after.
before coordinating conjunction that joins independent clauses. But Tate, if you were like me, I was focusing on this last dependent clause, and there is no comma. Do you know why?
Because after a minute is not a dependent clause, or is
Well, this whole thing is a dependent clause.
right, but like after a minute is not, it's just a,
Preposition.
phrase, yeah.
You were right. Can anybody tell me, why don't you need a comma here, for example? Okay, Isaac.
Because you don't put a comma when the dependent clause comes after an independent clause.
Good. When the dependent clause comes after the independent clause, you don't put a comma. Okay, you guys got that? Davis, question.
Could you say, would this still be a complex sentence, like if you said, although the cat ran and the dog barked, they stopped after a minute?
Yeah, you could pull this up, let's do that. So if we pulled this up and said, although
But there would be a comma then, right?
the
Yeah,
cat
there
ran
would be a
and
comma.
dog barked, and the dog barked,
But wouldn't that make, although the cat ran, would that be a dependent clause?
although the cat ran, this is where you would have the comma, you wouldn't have the comma here.
Wait,
And the
although
dog
the cat
barked,
ran
they stopped
and the
after a
dog barked.
Yeah.
No, there would be,
No, wouldn't that all be?
think about it, cause it would not be, although the cat ran and the dog barked, comma, they stopped after a minute.
Yeah.
That just sounds more, or,
Because the
I would
subordinate
agree.
meeting cannot
Told us
conjunct
earlier
starting
that-
at the
Okay, hold
beginning.
on, hold on, this is great, Davis.
The, subordinating conjunction is starting at the beginning, so you would always have a comma after that clause.
Okay, but do you see, this is the dependent clause, although the cat ran?
But wouldn't it be although the cat ran and the dog barked?
No, cause that's gonna.
I hear what you're saying, and I like what you're saying, but grammatically, you're gonna, this is a coordinating conjunction that's joining two subject-verb pairs. That makes this independent.
so
Okay?
so that's the correct
That is the correct thing.
But then when you are
Could
like
you do-
talking in a sentence, wouldn't, instead of saying, although the cat ran and the dog barked, they stopped after a minute? It, like, you naturally take a
Like it's
pause,
runs on,
like,
yeah.
I agree.
although the cat ran and the dog
I agree,
barked.
and I wouldn't
They
count that
stop
off in a
after a
paper, but I'm just saying grammatically, according to the rules, it's after the opening dependent clause, and you're not gonna have it right here, okay?
Okay.
But I do agree, and I like how it makes more sense. Okay, Reagan, nope, okay, Isaac,
I just don't really know how it makes sense to say the cat ran and the dog barked, although they stopped after a minute.
you don't know what?
I don't get how that makes sense. Like.
So with every sentence, you have
With the
a,
although.
you have a grammatical sense, that's what we're looking at, and then you have a logical sense.
Well, no,
What you two were talking about was a logical sense, what you're talking about is a logical sense.
well, I'm just saying, like, when it says the cat ran when the dog barked, or is that what it said? No, the cat ran and the dog barked, although, to me, like, adding although makes no sense.
It's not a great sentence. So let's try to construct one great sentence.
That sounds
Lena?
good to the ear.
I'm gonna throw it to you. I want you to look at, oh, and by the way, everybody has a sheet, subordinating conjunctions. Lena, I want you to pick out one to start a sentence with, okay? This is the exhaustive list, and so put it in your grammar, hold on to it. We're gonna keep referencing this throughout the semester. And they, if you'll notice, they're adverbial. They answer questions like when, where, how, to what extent. So we'll talk about that when we talk about adverbs. But can you start a sentence with one of these subordinating conjunctions? And let's see if we could build a sentence that is grammatically and logically sound. And I'll help you if
Do
you
you
just
want
give
me
me.
to start with the independent clause?
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
By the time I got to do homework, it was already late.
Okay. By the time, now I'm gonna tell you, these ones that are 2 and 3 words long, like, it's hard to memorize those, so it's nice to have this reference. This whole thing is a subordinating conjunction. By the time I what?
Got to do homework.
Ooh, what can we say instead of got?
I was through,
How about just did homework?
or by
Okay,
the time
by
I
the
was
time-
through.
I did my homework. What's the rest of it, Lena?
It was already late.
Okay, it was already late. Now, I want somebody, right now, what do we have? What, if we put a period here, Amanda, what kind of sentence is this? By the time I did my homework, it was already late. What is that?
By the time, that would be a preposition, right?
Okay, so this,
Simple sentence.
Sorry.
that is that sheet I gave you. This is
Complex.
a subordinating conjunction, it's on there, okay? What is it?
Complex.
It's complex. By the time I did my homework, dependent clause, it was already late, independent clause. Now, can somebody make this a compound complex? Can you add something that makes grammatical and logical sense, Jackson?
By the time I did my homework, it was already late and I couldn't wash my hair, so.
And I couldn't, I'm just gonna make
Or
this
I couldn't
shorter.
watch
Yeah,
the
that's
long
fine, that's
movie.
fine.
I couldn't shower.
Yeah, sure, that's fine.
Okay? So this is an example of something that makes a little bit more sense. By the time I did my homework, it was already late and I couldn't shower. How do we punctuate this? Owen?
You do, by the time I did my homework, comma, it was already late, comma, and then period.
And then have a period.
And And those commas are correct, and it sounds right,
And it
like you
sounds right.
say that.
Yes, okay? Now, the whole point, there's a lot you do in IEW that's very artificial just to learn a skill. And that's what we're doing today. We're doing something artificial. We're just making up sentences. But I want you in your short stories, when we start editing those next week, I really want you to be paying attention to having some compound complex sentences. What a lot of people will do is, left to their own, they will do simple sentences. So, I did my homework. It was late. I couldn't shower. So you can see those three simple sentences are very disjointed. So you put them together. By the time I did my homework, it was already late and I couldn't shower. It's better, okay? Isaac, questions?
So, how would you make that a prepositional phrase if you just take out the subject or something?
This?
Yeah.
It looks like a prepositional phrase, okay? Because there's a little preposition and there's an object of the preposition. But it is one of those prepositions that can be used as a preposition or it can be used as a subordinating conjunction, okay?
Yeah.
So all you can do is go off this list. That's why I gave it to you.
But if you would make a prepositional phrase over, how would you take out the subject? Take out.
By,
Yeah. By the time my homework was done.
it's really just yeah, I don't know. I do not know the answer. Okay, the last thing I want to do is how would we diagram this? Would anybody like to come up and try to do it, Davis? Okay, so while she's doing that, I'm going to hand out your homework and you are going to have diagramming.
Seriously, what is that?
Okay, you would pass that back. This is a 5-step piece of homework. And so I want to go over it with you guys. And part of it is going to be diagram. Thank you. So pay attention to what Davis is doing, okay? Compound, complex. Okay, Jackson, is there one for Spencer? No.
Oh, yes.
I have one for Spencer.
Is there another one?
I have an extra, I just broke my binder again. It's okay, what if you want to?
Okay, so, okay, so while Davis is working, okay, so this is a little bit tricky.
So there's like two verbs.
Okay, so just stand aside, you're gonna do it in just a second, but she did the independent. It was already late, and I couldn't shower. And so, you see how that's compound? She got the, oh, that's an adverb, just leave it the way it is, okay? Okay, so what do? When we start with the dependent clause, and we know we need to connect verb to verb, but there's a compound. What would make sense to do?
2 lines?
Could shower is a
No, not 2 lines.
verb phrase.
What would make sense to do? You take it off the verb that's closest to it. This is closest. So come off of that, and then, so you're coming underneath because it's complex. Okay?
Could it ever go like on the top or no?
Nope, dependent clause always underneath. Okay? And you're just gonna connect the verb to verb. Okay, while she is doing that, Lena, would you read the directions to the homework out loud? And could everybody follow along with this? And I've got one typo I need to correct.
Read each sentence. Circle the conjunctions that are joining clauses. Bracket and label the independent clauses and the dependent clauses. Write the sentence type on the line. Add any needed commas. Diagram the even numbered sentences on the back.
Okay, thank you, Davis. Would you guys, under number 3, where it says write the sentence type, would you cross out type and write structure? So write the sentence structure. And then I would like for you to do number 4 first. Because, which is read through everything and put the correct comma in, because the commas get lost in the brackets otherwise. Okay, so let's look at the diagramming. So it was late and I could not shower, and then we're putting that opening dependent clause under the verb that's closest to it. So that whole little phrase, by the time, connects to the I did homework, and it's verb to verb. Okay? Now, in this is the first time you've done something where you have simple, compound, complex, compound, complex. And I don't want you to write those out. I want you to just use abbreviations, simple, compound, complex, compound, complex. Okay? Questions, Isaac?
Somehow I came back to my pencil, there was no eraser or lead, so.
Okay, I'll loan you a pencil. You guys have got 10 minutes to work on this, so take that 10 minutes.